The following podcast is brought to you by Cast Content Media.
Hey guys, it's Ron Worley, your most imperfect host of Sons of Ditches. People are liars, thieves, addicts, and assholes. Some people change, and a few make a difference. But everyone has a story.
Hey everybody, this is Ron Worley with another week of Sons of Ditches. This week I have Lisa Dahl on, and she is an experienced podcast guest, so I'm excited to see what that means. But her message is about helping women learn to undiet their lives and discover their food freedom through my life pillars, instituting eating, mindful eating, haze, health at every size. That's what that means. You're going to have to explain that to us. Self-compassion and non-judgmental self-awareness. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have the conversation with you.
Yeah. So your 5 pillars right off the bat, the health at every size. Explain the 5 pillars and especially that one.
Okay, so thank you for asking. And I work to help women undiet their lives. And what I've discovered through my own personal journey and working with my clients, that it has come down to 5 pillars. And the 5 pillars are health at every size. And what that is all about is shifting the paradigm to believe, with supporting evidence, that you can be healthy no matter what size you are at. Mm-hmm. So it's learning to ditch the scale and waking up and saying, is it a good day? Is it a bad day? It's more based on your actions and your behaviors and not the number on the scale. Sure. And there is supporting science behind it. Health at Every Size was actually created by a woman named Dr. Linda Bacon, and she wrote a book which is part of how I became an intuitive eating and health and wellness coach. My second pillar is the practice of intuitive eating, which is about removing the diet rules, and it's based on 10 principles. And it starts with rejecting diet culture, moving through honoring your hunger, making peace with your plate, honoring your emotions with kindness, movement that makes you happy. And nutrition comes last, so you don't fall back into the diet trap. My third pillar is mindful eating. The fourth pillar is non-judgmental self-awareness, so that you view your actions and behaviors with curiosity versus judgment. And my last pillar is self-compassion, learning how to offer yourself the kindness that you typically so generously offer others.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. We often don't give ourselves grace, but we give others grace, and we make excuses for everybody else, but never ourselves.
Yeah, we're pretty cruel to ourselves.
Yeah, we really are, aren't we? So interesting. My whole family has had issues. They've been dieting their whole lives. My wife's side of the family, most of them are obese and dieting. And it is really the dieting that kills them, because every time they diet, they come back heavier. It works. They look great for a few months, and then boom, they're back to the same old and even bigger at that point.
Yeah, it is. And what you're sharing is common for everyone. And had we known what we know today before we went on our first diet, we would be so much better off. It has been proven that we are actually healthier without dieting and being in a larger body. Yeah. How do we embrace being in that larger body? How do we get rid of that judgment that society puts onto us? Because it is that stress that makes it so awful to feel accepted. And that's part of the negative emotional crush that happens. And that negative emotion is so debilitating and harmful to our physical and our mental health. And I really work with women to help them shift their mindset, learn to accept their here and now bodies. These are the bodies we are in until the end of time. Right. Nobody wants to live with it's like living with a partner or a spouse that you really hate. Right. And it's an awful experience. How do we start to make peace with ourselves? And I really that's the goal of working with my clients through my Body, Peace, and Food Freedom program.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea, because honestly, even if you diet down, I think we put too much stress on the way we should look rather than the way we do look. And we spend a lot of time trying to fix that.
Yeah. How do we focus on how do we feel in our bodies versus the gaze of looking at our bodies? So it's learning to be embodied versus what has been known as the male gaze on how we view our bodies. We're so focused on being from our neck up that we forget what it feels like to be connected from the neck down. And it takes time, patience, and practice. You don't just wake up and say, oh, I'm going to do this thing.
Right.
You can't fail it. It is a practice, and it's really learning how to shift that mindset and be willing to experiment on something different.
Yeah. So explain that a little bit. Experiment on something different. How do you distill this into their heads? I'm sure that takes a long time.
And as I said, it is about time, patience, practice, self-compassion. And it has to be willing to have an open mindset, starting with the curiosity versus judgment, and recognizing where diet culture comes from. Where are all those messages that you have learned? Just because we have heard them so many times, it doesn't make them true.
Yeah, right. Learning to question,
well, what makes that, diet culture? Who started it? It's all about money.
Yeah.
If you look at, I believe the statistics are it's only like 3 to 5% of the population looks like that quote unquote perfect person. And even those people are being airbrushed on the magazines. If you look around and you start to really look at what's in front of you, everybody's body is different. Who all of a sudden told us your body is better? Your body is better. Why is it? It's BS. It's how do we change our thoughts, and where do those thoughts come from so that we start to be able to feel better about ourselves and those around us?
How many of your clients actually have a eating disorder? Would you say that's a mild form in 100%, or is it?
So that's a good question. I work with women who have disordered eating patterns, not eating disorders. So there's a difference between I do not work with clients who are anorexic or bulimic. That is out of my scope of practice. I work with women who have disordered eating. Right. And I'm a perfect example. When I shifted 5+ years ago to the health and wellness field, I thought I was going to be the weight loss coach. I could diet quote unquote better than most people. I was able to keep my weight off better than most people. And what I discovered is that I had my own disordered eating challenges. And once I discovered that, I could no longer ethically or morally support anybody to help them lose weight. And I shifted my entire practice to a weight inclusive, non-diet approach to health and wellness. Yeah. And disordered eating is so common that we don't even know that it's just because it's normal, it doesn't make it healthy.
Right.
We've normalized it, unfortunately. And recognizing that is a willingness to take a deeper dive and really look at your actions and behaviors, because I was always praised at how well I diet and my restriction and my ability of willpower, and people are praising my craziness. It's how do we shift that when we say, it's so easy to greet somebody and the first thing that we say is, oh my God, you look so great. Did you lose weight? We don't know if somebody is suffering with an illness, if they're suffering with a loss, if they are in their own disordered eating. Right. How do we shift that conversation to, oh, I'm just so glad to see you.
Yes.
And if you notice a difference, you could say something, your eyes look sad, tell me what's happening, or you're so full of joy, tell me what's happening in your life, and get away from that commentary of focusing on our vessels, our bodies in which we just happen to inhabit.
Yeah, that's amazing. So just a real quick story about myself. So I come from a natural bodybuilding background, and I did that in my later age, after 30. And what it did was, I was completely engorged with the way I looked all the time, and I became very selfish. And during this special 12 weeks getting ready for a show, I would lose up to 50 pounds, but some of it was water weight, and but mostly fat. And how did I gain this much fat? I really didn't. We fluctuate fat and water, and I would look great for one day, and it was amazing. And then I would spend the rest of the time until the next show worried about how I looked in the mirror and thinking I looked fat. Yep. And now today I still suffer from some mild dysmorphia tendencies when I look in the mirror.
Dieting is the pathway to an eating disorder. It just is. And there's so much suffering, and you have suffered so much. And in that one day, in that snippet of time, and it's gone, you spend all of this time focusing on how to fix it, how to change it, how to do it, every calorie, every macro, and you spend so much time and energy, and then it's there for a split second, and then you're left feeling empty and sad because you no longer fit that bill of what that perfection was supposed to be. And it's fleeting, and it doesn't define anything about who you are in your head and your heart. It's just the vessel. And how do we get away from that? Because it causes so much pain and dysfunction.
Yeah,
and
I really don't
realize it.
Yeah, and people don't realize it. And so I'm glad you said that, because what we're doing is identifying with our bodies instead of who we are. And it's just, it's a trap. It's a complete trap. And if you look on like social media and places like that, it just gets worse and worse. And then unfortunately, we're probably raising little kids to be the same way.
And that's a really important topic. And it's something that I talk a lot about, is that our children are listening. Whether you have children or you are around somebody else's children, those kids are hearing those messages. Every time you body check, every time you say, I shouldn't, every time you have a judgment, they start to question, if you're not comfortable in your body, how could I be possibly comfortable in our body? And our children start to get messages to not trust their bodies, often from day one. So if you are a mom or dad or caregiver and you're responsible for feeding an infant, you either are offering them a breast or a bottle, and the baby will cry, you'll pick them up, they'll settle in, they will fall into a blissful sleep. And whoever is feeding them thinks that they know best. Well, they didn't really eat very much, or how long were they nursing for? And then all of a sudden you offer the breast and the bottle again. And that is the first message to that baby, that they can't trust themselves, that somebody else knows better. Then as they get older, they turn into toddlers and children. They're all of a sudden told, well, you have to eat before you go to school, or it's noon, you need to eat now. Nobody's asking, hey, are you hungry? Or you're tired at the end of the day and you want to make sure that they eat. You don't feel like doing snacks before bedtime. And again, it's based on your needs and not letting the children have autonomy on how and what they want to eat. We have the ability to change that conversation. So let's say you have a toddler or a child at home. Hey, honey, lunch is ready. When you're done playing, when you notice that your belly is hungry, come to the table and eat. It's ready and waiting. As opposed to come eat now. They're distracted, they're busy, they're happy. If they're hungry, they're going to let you know. And if they don't have those hunger signals, those traditional ones, it's learning to help them identify, noticing their behavior. Are they melting down? Are they in an inability to focus? And helping them recognize they're becoming, they're, I'm trying to think of the word I'm thinking of, through learning their body cues will help them learn how and what hunger and fullness feels like. It doesn't have to just be the tummy that's rumbling. So an example is, when our bladders are full and we feel that pressure, we know immediately that we're going to go to every possible extent to be able to go pee and relieve ourselves in a proper place. How do we learn to honor our hunger so that we don't get to starving and then have to stuff ourselves with whatever is around us to fill that need? And it's really I help women learn how to go back to their childhood in gaining that confidence to be able to learn to listen, trust, and respect their bodies, because it is a practice that we can learn.
So it's 100% mental. It's a mental battle. So is this something, I know how you said you've gotten to this practice, but you got into health and wellness. How did you, what brought you to that?
I needed a career change. I'm a former caterer. I'd had my own business for many years. I then went through divorce and needed to go work for a couple of companies just for financial reasons. And during all of this, my personal life had shifted, and my partner and I were moving in together. And he gave me the most incredible gift to be able to quit my job and go back to school for a year.
Nice.
And I took that year and passed my personal training certification, became a health and wellness coach, thought I was going to help women lose weight, discovered just through my desire to be the best coach that I could be and continuing my education, I discovered health at every size and intuitive eating, and worked on healing my own disordered eating. And from there, really focused on my practice now of intuitive eating and body image health coaching.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's usually pretty personal when you, especially the health and wellness. There's always a story behind it.
There is. I started dieting was 12. And I remember the first time when I was in elementary school, knowing that not to trust my body. I was told that I had to go to special gym because I couldn't walk on the balance beam. And from that point on, I was always last picked on any team, and I never felt confident to do sports. And it shifted my whole physical being. And
Sure.
Then in high school, you're being weighed and measured with a sea of girls, and you feel bigger and different than everybody else. And again, focusing on how uncomfortable you are in your body. And I'm 56. It took almost 40 plus years to regain to have confidence again in who I am, how to show up, and not be so dependent on, am I thin enough to be accepted? I threw out my scale a long time ago and gave it up. And, I still notice changes today. It's an ongoing journey. There's no fixing. It's just a learning process.
Absolutely. And so were you heavy as a child then? Is that what you're getting at?
In my opinion, yes. You look back at pictures and you think, was that like really? But there were times in my life where I was in a larger body, and definitely in a larger body. And that's all from the years of dieting and restriction and deprivation. And then you refeed and you have babies and you gain weight. And as women, we're taught not to embrace that. Every time you go into a doctor's office, you're weighed and you're measured. And several years ago, I made it very clear to any doctor, I am not getting on a scale. And sometimes the nurses kind of give me a look, and I don't really care, unless there is a medical reason for me to be weighed. It's unnecessary. It doesn't tell them anything about my health and wellness. Tell me about my blood levels. Tell me about my cholesterol. Tell me, are my actions and my behaviors making a difference?
Sure.
That's what's important. And
I've seen athletes. Let's talk about football players, the linemen. They are huge, and a lot of them are obese, and they're some of the fastest, most agile, healthiest men in the world. So it absolutely has no bearing. And I'm going to steal that. I'm not going to weigh in anymore when I go to the doctor.
Yeah, you could. I even have a little card that I had sent away from, that I often give to my clients, that you can hand, if you're uncomfortable to say the words, you can even hand it saying, unless it's medically necessary, please do not weigh me. Don't even ask. And how do we get rid of, even the language?
Right.
It's, overweight, over what weight? The BMI is BS.
It is BS.
It has nothing to do with anything. And, I'm not sure when this is, being aired, but it's now, diet season. And every diet coach, every supplement company, everybody is reminding you on how to fix your body January 1.
Yep. And that baffles me that everybody worries about their weight loss. I used to own a nutrition store, and our busy months were January through June, and January is when it started to pick up. March was the best month of the year because people were starting to ramp up. They were failing in February, because, anybody can willpower a good month, but second month they were starting to fail. And so they would come in and see us, and then, and then we wouldn't see them again after June, and repeat every year.
Every year. And how do you change that cycle? Because what you have been doing isn't working. The statistics are 95% of people who go on a diet will not only regain their lost weight, they will gain additional weight. And until you get off of that pendulum of restrict and deprive and refeed, and learn to figure out how to be somewhere in the center, it's going to continue to cycle over and over and over again. And that is far more unhealthy than being in a fat or a larger body. It's
true. And so here's the opposite of the plane. So at that time I owned those stores, I was also in top condition. Like I said, I was a natural bodybuilder. This is 5 years ago. August of 2016, I dropped dead of heart failure. And what my health did not tell me is that I had a heart illness, and nobody knew. The doctors didn't know. I came in months prior and said, "Hey, I'm passing out while I'm laughing at the movies, and that's not normal. And my resting heart rate was in the 80s, and I'm in top condition. How is this happening?" And nothing was done. And then, sure enough, 2 months later, I dropped dead, and right in front of my wife, and it was horrible. But there were, here I thought I was in shape, and now I'll tell you, now I'm in better shape now, heart health wise, and cholesterol and all that stuff, and I probably, I got more body fat, but I feel better.
Right. And you're healthier mentally, emotionally, and those have a direct impact onto your physical health.
Absolutely.
We talk about people being in larger bodies and how poor their health is. And that's part of society's fault, because they're afraid to go into a doctor's office, because the first thing that they're going to tell them to do is to lose weight, without looking at them as a human being. They just look at them as a number. Disgusting. And that is so detrimental to their mental and emotional health. And we need to learn the impact that has on our physical bodies. And, and then people get stuck in healthism and looking at, just because you're in this thinner, smaller body and you eat organically, that you're supposed to be healthy.
Right.
Organic food is not, organic food doesn't make you healthy.
No.
It just doesn't. And, you can prefer to eat organically. That's fine if that's your preference. But what does your mental health look like when you say, well, I only eat organically, I only eat clean? That in itself is a form of disordered eating, when there is no gray area. I work with my clients to be in the gray, to shoot for the C, because when you get into the A range, that's perfectionism that is just going to kill you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And boy, how quickly you get tired of doing it too, running the same circles over and over. It's no different than abuse patterns, and we're just abusing ourselves, really.
Right.
So question for you, so how much are you seeing are women coming to you mostly with these issues, or are they coming to you after they've had cholesterol issues, blood pressure issues? Are you seeing a lot of medical reasons for them to come?
It's really a good mix.
Okay.
Some people are just mentally exhausted of going on that continuing roller coaster of the ups and downs. Some of them are pre-diabetic, some are already diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has a different journey. Everyone gets to a different point at a different time. And the best time is really when you kind of wake up and you say, you know what, I'm tired of the rules. I'm tired of the restrictions. I'm tired of looking at myself and thinking I hate myself.
Yeah.
How do you learn to offer yourself that compassion so that you can be happy, healthy, and confident at any size, and really start to believe that you can be empowered no matter what size you are, and the actions and the behaviors that you take. And it's not, nobody's telling you that you have to do this, and this to be healthy. Health is what it means to you. My idea of healthy may be different than your idea of healthy.
Sure.
Just like 5 years ago, your vision of healthy was standing on a stage, having everybody look at your body. And you didn't know it was unhealthy until you couldn't do it anymore. And you were willing to share that, oh my, like, this isn't working. I need help. And it's hard to get off of that perfectionism platform because everybody has an opinion and it has a thought. Mm-hmm. And it's, and it still comes up for me in conversation. The other night we had some friends over, and, health and wellness always comes up, and she was, and my weight is always a topic, not so much anymore, but of conversation. And, when I met you, here's what I thought, that you were too thin, you were too this, you were too that, but you were so militant and you were able to continue to do this for so long. And when you get that feedback, it's hard to break away from that. Because everyone always would say, like, you do this so well, you do this so well. And then all of a sudden you're going, well, am I disappointing somebody? And then one day you wake up and you go, well, it doesn't matter if I'm disappointing somebody. What about me?
Right.
I really want that ice cream and I really want to enjoy it.
Absolutely. I always tell everybody, it sucks getting older. I mean, that's a fact. I mean, I don't like it, but I sure like myself more when when I hit my 40s. That was when I got a little more selfish and said, what about me?
Right. How do you set those boundaries? And there's a great book that I just read called Fierce Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. And it's learning to really set boundaries and to be able to say no to all these things so that you can say yes to what's important to you and take that time to discover what's important to you, and not to be sorry for taking care of yourself. As women, I'm sorry, I need to do this. Why is sorry? Right. Our needs and everybody's needs. It's not just about women. Everyone needs to remember that their needs do not get diminished by somebody else's needs.
Absolutely. Well, it's like the airbag in the airplane, right?
It's exactly the oxygen mask. It's the perfect example that we all go to. And I refer to it often as the ripple effect of self-care. When you can take care of yourself, you will have the greater capacity to support those around you.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. And when you're a parent, you can, if you're eating a certain way, your children will eat that same way.
Well, it's interesting.
Or try to.
Yeah. So my kids are now 29 and my son's going to be 25 tomorrow. And he came home over the summer and there's now bread and butter on the table, something that we just didn't put it on the table. I wasn't going to eat it. The butter was bad. The bread, you didn't need the calorie. There was a whole litany of why that was not on the table. Or if it was for somebody else, and it certainly wasn't for me. And he said, I was out to dinner with a couple of the guys and there was bread and butter at the table in the restaurant and I butter shamed them. Said, what? He said, yeah, I butter shamed them. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, they took a roll and then they took their knife and they dived into the butter and they put, like a mound of butter on them. And I just couldn't contain myself. And I had to comment on how much butter they had. And that was right out of me, because if you were going to have bread and butter in our house, it had to be a very thin layer. Like there was no gobs of anything from butter to peanut butter, any sauce, any dressing, you could have it, but it was just a very thin line.
Right.
And, and I get comments on what I eat now. Yes, I will eat bread and butter. And my partner is originally from the Czech Republic, and he's like a meat and potatoes pork guy through and through. And for his birthday, we don't do gifts. We try to just make the day extra special. Nice. And I took a full day off from work, and former caterer, and he's always asked, will you make pulled pork? And I'm like, well, I don't know how to make it. And I don't make it. Well, that's BS, because I'm a freaking caterer. I can cook anything I want to cook. And basically I never made it because I don't eat it. And, I'm not allowed to eat it. For 100 different reasons. I grew up in a Jewish home. We didn't eat pork, and, then it's not healthy, and all these things that I have been told or thought for many years. Yeah. And I figured, okay, I'm going to make this, and I'm going to make all these things that he loves. And halfway through the day, it was just me home cooking, and it smelled amazing. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, well, I've got this piece of salmon. I was going to put it on the grill and I was going to have that. And I'm standing there and going, well, you are allowed to eat it. You're allowed to taste it. And I tasted it and I'm having this full conversation with myself. And I'm saying, well, this is really good. Like, why do I really want to eat salmon? Like I have salmon, every other week.
Right.
And I decided I'm not making a second meal. And we, a few hours later, we sat down to dinner and we had friends over and I put all the food on the table and they both looked at me and they said, well, what are you eating? And I said, because I prefer a plant-based diet on top of it all. And I said, I'm actually going to eat the pulled pork. And they looked at me like their mouths dropped open. And I said, well, I tasted it and it was really good. And yes, I prefer plant-based and there's still room for other things. And I'm going to eat it and I'm going to enjoy it. And we're going to share this meal together. And it was just such a very defining moment in my journey. And there's still those moments, even though I've been doing this for a couple of years now, there's still moments that are areas for growth and change.
That is so profound because it's almost like an addiction. I'm also an addict and I've been sober for 18 years and I'm very careful with, I have certain regiments and things. And sometimes when you get a freedom like that, like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and eat it. And, I could just imagine how great that felt that you're, this doesn't mean you're going to eat it every day. Just you're going to enjoy it this time and not beat yourself up for it.
Right. It's removing the rules and the regulations that go with it.
Yeah. I like it.
We were just traveling and, we were struggling with where to go for a restaurant. And we decided that we were going to eat out of this food truck. And the only thing that they had was grilled chicken. And 3 years ago, I would have, dug my heels in and I would have just only eaten the vegetables off of the one vegetable that was offered. And I would have filled my plate 10 times. And I was like, you know what? This is what's in front of us. This is the best choice. It was delicious and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's so freeing. And if somebody ever told me that I was going to freely eat chicken, that I would enjoy ice cream again, that my day would not be filled with counting calories and weighing, using my Weight Watcher scale from the time that I was 12 years old that I used for 40 years, that I would throw it out. Never would have believed it.
That's amazing. I know all of our listeners are getting something from this because I know I am. I've got 2 questions for you. The first one is, what is your take on all the gastric bypass, the bans, all that stuff? What you're feeling there?
It makes me sad.
Yeah.
It really, that is the first word that comes to my mind, is that somebody feels so desperate to go to that extreme, because it's not just have the surgery and you're quote unquote fixed. There's so many trade-offs with it. And you have, other types of things come into what you can eat, what you can't eat, how your body processes. And it really doesn't deal with your relationship to food. In my opinion, right, it further damages your relationship to your body. It hasn't broached on healing. It just compounds the challenges that you've had. And it just makes me sad. And I just think that there's other ways to be able to make peace with your food and body as opposed to a surgical procedure. Granted, I'm not a doctor. This is just from my perspective and what I have read and what I see. And it just, to my core, it just makes me sad.
No, you're amazing. I kind of figured you'd come from that approach. And I've seen it in some family members. They went and got I think it was the bypass, the one that might be the ban, because they were able to remove it. But they couldn't do the eating part. They couldn't eat 500 calories a day, and they were overeating, getting sick, because their addiction to the food was still there.
And it compounds it more, because you just go back into further restriction. Yep. The restriction is what got them there in the first place.
Yep. And she is now heavier than ever before, and back on another, I think, the bypass this time. I don't know for sure. But
pass my information along because I'm not here to fix. I'm here to offer another path and to try something different and to learn. People often say, well, she's in a larger body. She has no self-esteem. Self-esteem is there when you're on the top, when you're better, quote unquote, than somebody else. Self-compassion is there on the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it helps you to be able to make those mistakes and to be kind to yourself and to continue to grow.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely. So there's still help you can still help somebody that's had one of those surgeries done then.
Absolutely. I'm not a registered dietitian.
Right.
I always want to be very clear on that. People ask, will I lose weight? My simple answer is, I don't know if you will gain weight, lose weight, or stay the same. I shift our metrics on how we measure success and progress, that it has nothing to do with the number on the scale. It is more about learning to understand how you feel mentally, emotionally, and physically. So we really talk about actions and behaviors and where the information come from and how to learn to accept your here and now body. Not everybody is going to be a certain size. Right. It's what is your genetics? What is your DNA? What is your food history, your food security or insecurity? What is your mental health? All of those things come into play. So nobody knows what is learning. It's learning, trying to discover what your natural set point is when you're not restricting, depriving, and dieting.
Right. Absolutely. And so I see that a lot of this, let me get into the microphone, a lot of people's mental well-being or the lack thereof, and a lot of addictions and whatnot they come from the childhood. And I could tell you specifically on this person I'm talking about, she was very, not abused, but she was very a certain way when she was a child, and you saw it coming. She's too helpful and lets people run over her and
people pleasing.
Yes. And that's her role in the family. And recently she has popped out of that and said, no more, I'm going to worry about me, because she has a kid now and a family to worry about. And she takes care of old people. And it's just amazing who she is as a person and who she's becoming. But part of her getting the surgery was to overcome some of that stuff for her. But I still see the addiction there. We still talk about it, food like it's a drug,
Right.
These kind of things.
And when you start to learn how to give yourself permission is when things really start to shift. When we talk about children, it's, you take a 3-year-old and you tell them, no, you can't have this. They're like on the floor flapping around like a dying fish. We're no different. The more that we say we can't, we want it.
Right.
When we start to be able to give ourselves permission and learn to trust that we can go through that experience, and you might go over the edge and eat and eat and eat. But when you give yourself permission, we're not talking about willy-nilly going through the cabinets and picking and choosing and doing all these things. We're talking about mindfully eating and being present. And that if you're going to eat a pint or a gallon of ice cream, sit down and be present with that, so that you're not doing it mindlessly, and that you learn to respond versus react. And all of those pieces come together with time. And everybody's timeline is different.
Sure. It's funny, my youngest child, he has this weird relationship with food. I would catch him snacking. He'd be hiding in the snack closet and just pounding as much food as he could. Without anybody seeing him. And then, you catch him in there and it was like you caught him doing something wrong. And I think that was the first time we realized as parents that probably what we were doing as bodybuilders was not okay. It was creating this something in our children. He was the only one that really had issues, with the way he's a bigger guy and he's fine with it. And he's got a bigger girlfriend and they're fine. They look great. They feel great. They're young. They're spry.
It's the messaging, and
yeah.
And when we set those rules, it forces them to sneak.
Yeah.
And we set them up.
It's almost like they're ashamed.
Right. It's the guilt and the shame because it's breaking against what you believe to be true. and they don't want to go against you. And that's,
Right.
and we stand sneak eating and we stand in front of the refrigerator, or you eat quickly before somebody comes home from work.
Right.
All of those, been there, done that,
Yeah.
Oh, my mom's coming home. She's driving down, I can see her coming down the road. Better finish up and put those cookie box away.
Yep.
How do we learn to eat in public? How do we,
That's good. Yeah.
and that was a hard one. And, 2 years ago, I went out, we were visiting friends at the Cape. We live in Massachusetts, and we had spent the afternoon eating and just relaxing, having a nice barbecue. And at 7:00 at night, my girlfriend said, let's go out for ice cream. And the guys were done. They were already toast. And I said, I'll go. And she looked at me. She's like, really? I said, yeah, let's go. And we stood in line, we ordered, we sat, we talked, we ate, and we finished. And she said to me, this is the first time in 25 years that she and I had ever gone out for ice cream, that I ordered a flavor versus tasting 3 and deciding I'm not going to have any. I didn't ask to share hers. I didn't comment on the size. I sat, I ate, and enjoyed.
Yeah. There's more to it than just ice cream, huh?
Yeah.
Amazing.
So it's a journey. It's a journey for so many of us.
I didn't even realize your coaching, your job was out there. And I'm so glad you came on our show. I have one last question. I warned you it was coming. So we play Brewster's Billions at the end of the show. You get $1 billion to do whatever you want to with it, but you can't have any left over and you can't have any assets when you're done. What do you do?
Definitely, my daughter has ulcerative colitis, and fortunately, she is very well, and we're very fortunate. But definitely, a huge, huge portion goes to science and research. Definitely to support families who experience hunger. I grew up in a home where my parents were all about social services, and that is where it would go, is how to help and support others so that they can have the privilege that I have been so fortunate to experience in my life.
Man, I love it. That's perfect. So your neighborhood would be rich. This actually happened in Fort Collins, which is near to me. A billionaire came in and injected hundreds of millions of dollars into the community, and wow, what a difference it made.
So you're out in Colorado.
I am. Yeah, we're in Windsor, Colorado, northern.
I used to live in Evergreen, Colorado, and I went to school at University of Denver. Love. One of my favorite places.
Really?
One of my all-time favorite places.
My sister-in-law actually teaches at in Denver
Nice.
High School, I think. So rough school, but she loves it.
Oh, it's a great location.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Now, how can we find you?
You can find me at Lisa Dahl, Dahl, wellness.com. And I offer a free discovery call. So please feel free to reach out and learn more about my How to Discover Your Food Freedom through Body Peace and Food Freedom program. And I work with clients one-on-one as well as on a small group program. So would love to chat with you and to be able to support your health and wellness journey.
Absolutely. And guys, if you do have questions or need help, I will help you find her. She's amazing. I'm going to send someone to you, hopefully. And thank you so much for coming on. Good luck with everything in the future.
Thank you so much. It was just a treat to get to talk to you.
Thank you for tuning in to Sons of Ditches. For more information, go to my website, ronworley.com, and my YouTube channel, Sons of Ditches. Facebook, Ron L. Worley, or Instagram at Ronald L. Worley II.